Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another exciting video in the Let's Build That App.com channel. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Now, this lesson is episode 2 of the UIKit Facebook 2019 tutorial series. In the very first episode, I showed everyone how to render out this view inside of the terminal right over here. So if you missed that lesson, you can find a link in the description below. In today's video, we are going to move on and start rendering out some photos inside of our post cells right here. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 post cells currently. And in the finished version of the app on the right side, you'll see that inside of each of these cells, right, we have a grid of photos, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And likewise for the rest of the cells inside of our list here. So you might be wondering, how exactly do we render out this type of grid, right? Well, there's a ton of different ways that you can do this. For example, you can use a stack view and apply 2 different stacks horizontally and vertically like that. Or something else that's a little bit better is to use a collection view controller. So for example, if you want to support different layouts, maybe you want to have 2 photos side by side instead of 5, using a collection view controller is actually a lot easier. So with that being said, let me show you how we can improve our application right now. Here is our project. If you go ahead and make some changes inside of your cells, so for example, if you change this to a blue color right here, hit the resume, you'll see the red in the image view post cell. You'll see it to blue just like that. So pretty awesome. Again, I really like the post preview right here inside of Xcode 11. Anytime you update your code, the changes are pretty much shown automatically. So really good stuff on Apple's part for implementing this. Helps me record these videos a lot faster. Okay, so with all of that said, let's begin by introducing this grid right here, right? So how exactly do we do this grid? Well, we have this image view grid in the yellow from the last episode right here. And today's video, I'm going to replace this grid with a collection view somehow. And again, there's a lot of different ways to actually implement this. I find the easiest way is to actually use a list controller. And if you command click into these classes, it'll take you inside of the documentation. This guy is a list header controller, which is really just a list header footer controller, which is eventually a collection view controller. And most of you guys probably know this already. There's a collection view inside of that guy. Okay, now with all of the little bit of details out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and create a separate grid. So this is going to be a new file. And so with file, let's call this guy the photos grid controller. And I'm going to create this instead of a separate file. This way I can preview what's going on. And eventually, once I'm done previewing this class here, I'm going to put it back inside of the post cell. So it might sound a little bit confusing, but it's actually pretty straightforward, at least to me. I'm going to go ahead and say class, and let's say photos grid. So photos grid controller, and this will be a list controller using import LBTATools like so. All right, list controller is going to pop up here. Again, I need 2 generics, T and U. And then finally, this guy is going to be some kind of view to load. First, I'll need to apply a cell for T, this generic here. That way I can start rendering out my photo cells. So let's call this the photo grid cell like so. This is a list cell like that. And why don't we use a string as well for this generic here? Again, every time you create one of these list controller guys, you need to have the T right here, which is your cell. And then the second generic U is the actual item inside of your controller. All right, now this guy, I'm let's see, background color, set this guy equal to yellow. And then now I'm pretty much ready to start rendering out this guy in the preview on the right side panel. Again, when you want to render out these previews, right, you have to create a struct. And let's call this the photos grid preview, preview provider. And this guy, static var previews and some view. I've gotten pretty fast at typing this stuff out. Let's say grid preview on the right side. And now you can hit Command Option Enter twice, or you can click on this little button on the top right corner, hit that once and hit that one more time. You'll get this guy to show up. And now what you can do is you'll see this grid preview instead of a text once this guy is done right here. So grid preview. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start rendering out my photos grid controller. This is pretty easy. I'm going to use a struct and a container view again, just like last episode. And this will be a UI view controller representable. Really hard to find sometimes. But this guy, we are going to need to update the UI view controller. Again, this method, you don't need to do anything, but just provide it. And then lastly, make UI view controller. Replace this with a UI view controller just to kind of shut up the Xcode compiler errors. And then finally, replace this with a photos grid controller, just like this. Okay, with the container view now available, we can replace the text grid view here. So just replace that. And now we are ready to rock and roll. Command Option P to resume the preview on the right side. And you'll see this empty screen right here. Let's go ahead and say view did load, super view did load, collection view, background color equals something like light gray. And let's hit the resume again. You'll see on the right side, your collection view is now showing in the light gray. Okay, now with all that done, I'm going to start drawing out my grid of cells inside of here. And the way I'm going to do this is to use a couple of items here. So self.items for a list controller, the items will be a string array. And you can say 1, so 1, and then 2, and then 3, like so. Okay, that's all I need to show 3 grid cells inside of my preview panel on the right edge. And the next thing I will want to do to start drawing out these grids is to make sure the sizing is correct, right? And to provide sizing, you will need the delegate flow layout protocol. A really, really long name to say. But once you have that protocol conformed to by the grid controller, you can implement this, and let's just say return some kind of width and height. For this, let's just use view frame width for now, and 100 for the actual size. Command Option P to resume. And now you'll see the yellow cells will be fully wide, right? Pretty easy stuff. And you know, every time you create a collection view, you have to go through this little bit of exercise. Using the list controller just makes things a lot faster, in my opinion. Okay, with the grid now being rendered out, we are going to figure out how to draw out 5 cells inside of our collection view horizontally. And the way to do this is pretty simple. It's just a little bit of math. What I'm going to do is for the size for item method right here, right? Let's say instead of 5 cells, I want 3 horizontal cells. I'm going to do this here. I am going to provide some kind of width value. So width equals something. And this is going to come from the math of, let's say, view.frame.width. And let's just divide this value by 3 for now. And I'll take the width here and replace each of these cell sizes with the width like that. So you'll see we have 1, 2, and 3. And you might be asking, why are they not being placed in one single row? Well, the reason why this guy is down here is because there's not enough space in this single row to render out 3 items. And the reason for that is because by default, collection views have a minimum inter-item space of 8 or 10. Whatever that value is, you can override it with minimum inner item spacing right here and return a value of 0. And let's hit the resume again. And then now we should get 3 cells, 1, 2, and 3 inside of our collection view. So it might seem like 1 cell, but there's actually 3 cells inside of here, obviously. And now all that's left is to make sure that there's padding around your cells. The way to control the padding is to give the left and right edge of this entire section some padding. And let's say inset for section at, return a edge inset value of 0, 8, or maybe 4, and 4. All right. With that change, however, we're going to have some space on the left edge here and the right edge. And again, because we don't have enough space for the entire row, the third cell is shifted down to the bottom. So in order to account for all this, we have to modify the size for item width right here. And the way I'm going to do this is to take in some of this padding space right here. And I'm just going to -3 times the value of 4, and then just kind of do the math here. And then just by doing that, you'll see that the spacing is pretty okay. We have some spacing here and here and here. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I might need to change this to 4. That might be a little bit better. It gives my cells a little more consistency right here. So here's how you actually lay out 3 cells horizontally. Again, there's a little bit of math, and you might want to provide this 4 as a constant value. So in other words, you might want to say, let cell padding or cell spacing, whatever you want this value to be, is a CG float of 4. And this guy is one of these 4s right here, and let's say that, and also that right here. This way, you want to put in these hard-coded constant values in your code. Making a variable available is a lot better. So for example, if I want to change this to a value of 8, we can modify that, hit the resume, and the math will hopefully still work out for our cells here. All right, I'm going to bring this back to 4, hit the resume, and everything should come back according to the math here. Okay, before I draw out the other cells in this 5 grid cell format, why don't we now take this controller here? So it's called Photos Grid Controller. I might have spelled this incorrectly. Let me fix that before it causes me too many problems. And I should be good. I might have to restart Xcode, but let's see, go back to Photos Grid Controller. This looks okay. Hit resume, and we are back in action there. Okay. Moving back to the main controller, right? We want to start drawing out the grid of cells inside of this area here, this yellow area. The easiest way of doing this is to replace the image view grid at the very bottom of our cell, so our post cells here. I'm going to replace this with the actual view from a photos grid controller. So how exactly do you do this, right? Well, I'm going to go ahead and inside of my cell, I'm going to give it an instance of Photos Grid Controller. Let it be Photos Grid Controller like so. I'm going to comment out the image view grid in the yellow. And instead of using this image view grid, right, I'm going to just take this right here. And for any type of view controller inside of iOS development, it has an instance of its view that you can access directly like that. So with all of that kind of inside of our code here, now what you can see is that the Photos Grid Controller is now showing up in the yellow here. So 1, 2, 3. And if I make a change to the Photos Grid Controller, for example, you'll see that for size for item at, right? I am sizing my height for each one of these cells using this height value of 100, so it's a pretty arbitrary value. I'm going to give these guys the height of width as well, making the actual cells perfectly square. That's kind of the effect I'm trying to go for, but you can obviously modify that to be whatever you want. Whenever you hit the Command S to save this file, you can go back to the main controller that now contains your grid, and you kind of see the cell automatically update right here to now be perfectly square. Okay, so I find that using the preview inside of Xcode right now, it makes your job as an iOS developer just that much faster. You don't have to restart the simulator to make sure things are looking okay. Just modify the previews accordingly. And this way, you can see exactly what your code is going to be rendered out as. All right, this seems like it took quite a bit of time to actually render out. When you're used to programming like this, things become really, really easy. Now that we have our 3 yellow cells inside of the Photos Grid Controller, you might be asking, well, what if I want to render out the cells kind of like this right here, right? How exactly do I do that? Well, I'm going to Well, you have to modify the math a little bit, but before I do that, why don't I show you how to render out the image views inside of this cell. So we have at the very top, we have the photo grid cell. And to render out an image view, it's just very simple. Use this guy right here. I'm going to use image view. For LBTATools, we have this method right here. And we can provide the content mode of scale aspect fill is what I want. And for the image, you can pretty much create any image that you want. I am going to open up assets and then drag in an asset that I'll use right now. So what exactly do I want? Maybe I'll use this one. Yeah, these seem okay. I'm going to drag in 3 photos right here. So there's 1 and 2 and 3. Let me go back to my photos grid controller, and this guy, I'm going to use the image literal. And I noticed that Xcode is really buggy when I use this little instantiator right here. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to use the image and named, and let's say avatar1 like that. I think that should be okay. And this guy, you might need to unwrap it. No, actually I think it's okay. All right, this is looking pretty nice. Now what I'll do is for the actual photo grid cell with the image view, right? I am just going to either add it as a subview like that. So image view, image view.fill super view. I think I can hit resume and the image should show up right there. So that's what I have so far. Something else that you can also do is to just stack it. So, you know, there's a lot of tricks that you can do with LBTATools. This is one line of code. I find this a little bit better if you only have one single view. This will add it inside of a stack view. There's an extra layer of stack view, but I guess you can decide on what you want to do instead. All right, now with our image view inside of here, what you can also do is for the actual photos grid controller, which is rendering out your 3 cells right here, you're passing in 1, 2, and 3 as strings into the items array. And you don't really see the magic happening here, but every time you have an array right here for the list controller, you are actually passing in the item directly in the cell using this item property. And whenever it's set, you can do whatever you want inside of this guy. So for example, if I say avatar1 right here, go back to my assets, I'm going to pull in story photo 1. And let's say story photo 1 right here and story photo 2. And let me just hit that resume here. Every time these items are being set from the, let's see, photos grid cell, I'm going to say image view and image equals UI image. And let's say name of the item. And because the item is a string variable, everything should render out correctly. And I don't think we'll see any crashes. And that's exactly what we get. So we have 3 photos right here. They all look a little bit different. Okay, so moving on here, before I render out 5 cells inside of this grid, I actually want to go back to the main controller here, and you'll see that the preview for our main controller is now automatically updated with the action and the code inside of the photos grid controller. So 3 photos here. Going back to the preview, you'll see those 3 photos as well. So pretty good and pretty fast. I don't have to restart the simulator. And again, this is making my life a lot easier already. Okay, now the ultimate question is, how exactly do we render out 5 cells inside of this format here, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And let me just try to do this really quickly. It's always hard to demonstrate math while I'm coding live, but here is what I'll do. So at the very top here, I have 2 images, right? So I am going to go ahead and take the 3 down to 2, and that's going to make the image look kind of like that. And let me just take this down to 3. So 3 times cell spacing, and that's how I get 2 images inside of the top horizontal row. And so this only happens if the index path is 0 and 1. And I'll capture that right here. So if the index path is, let's see, item is equal to 1 or 0, or index path, the item is 1. So that's my little check here. I'm going to take that and then put that inside the top there. So because we have actually 4 or 3 items inside of this array, it's going to crash when it tries to render out this. So you can just take this and init with, let's see, the width is view frame width like that. And maybe this guy is just a value of 50. Okay, I'm going to render that out, maybe bring this to 150, and you'll see the third photo right here. So if you want to render out 5 cells, right, all you got to do is to take this and let's use the, let me just copy this again with avatar 1 and then also avatar 1. Okay, so you'll see the 2 other cells appear down here. And what I'm going to do is I am going to take this bit of math here again and bring back the original math of 3 and 4. And we now have this little bit of magic right there. Okay, so I don't think I need this anymore, and I can try to run this one more time. So what you'll notice is that whenever you have your cells right here, right, you have this vertical gap, and you can fix the vertical gap by overriding the minimum align spacing and return a value of the cell spacing, which is 4 currently. And I'll hit the resume right here, and you'll see this gap is going to reduce by just a little bit there. Okay, so now the next question is, how exactly do we fix the spacing between this cell and that cell right there? Well, the trick here is to go back inside the minimum inner item spacing method, and I believe either you can comment all this code out or you can provide a value of 4 right here. So that looks like it didn't work. I'm just going to go here and give it the value of cell spacing, and I believe things should render out correctly. Let me just kind of put that in here. And here's one problem I noticed with the math that we're doing. I believe when you're trying to divide all these spacing values by these float right here, these float numbers, it doesn't exactly work. So I'm going to give this a value of 4.1, and that should give us enough math clearance and enough padding to fit everything in one cell. Okay, so that's a little bit of a hack, but things do appear to look okay. So I'm just going to leave this hack in here. But again, this is definitely a hack. Let's go back to our main controller now, and you'll see that our photos are really big. You're not seeing the other cells down below because we are now going to render out the, let's see, main controller. We have size for item for each of these post cells here. I am going to render out a value of 350 for our cells right there. If you bring this up to, let's say, 450, that's what you'll get. And we can bring this to 400 to make it look a little bit nicer right here. The sizing isn't exactly perfect, but hopefully through this exercise, you can see how easy it is to render out a grid of cells inside of a collection view. The reason, again, why I am using a grid of cells instead of a stack view is because it's a lot easier to modify the photos just by passing in this array here. Everything is pretty much handled for you using the list controller. If you use the stack view, you'll have to set all of these photos manually. It's not super difficult, but it's a little bit of code that I would like to avoid typing if I can. Finally, the other advantage to using a photos grid controller is, let's say you want to control the layout based on the amount of photos that you have, right? So for example, if you have 1, 2, and 3, and 4, so you have a grid of 4 photos, you can control the sizing just by going inside of here. And you can, for example, if the self.items.count is, let's see, equals to 4, then you do your 4 grid cell layout here. Otherwise, you perform the 5 grid cell layout here. So that's kind of the advantage of using this little bit of code of a collection view. But again, doing it with a stack view is also perfectly fine. If you want to download the source code for the entire lesson in today's video, make sure to head on over to letsbuildthatapp.com. You can find the available source code right over here on the right side. And while you're here, check out the rest of the available courses on the website. Again, brand new course with maps, with direction, and Google Places. A really, really amazing course, and hopefully I can see you in the very first lesson there. That's going to be it for today's video. Make sure to leave a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye, guys.